Hello, and welcome to Mixed Media. On this episode, we will be doing reviews again from different forms of art we found on Reddit. As you can see, we have a special guest coming from two episodes ago, actually, from one of the movies we reviewed. If you'd like, introduce yourself first.
Hi, yeah, my name's Jason David.
All right, and yeah, I guess we can go through introductions of the rest of ourselves. So I am Nathan. I am a game developer and 3D modeler.
I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flutist, flautist, flute player, whatever you want to call that, and a media composer.
Is flutist the right term, or is it actually flautist?
In Europe, people tend to say flautist, and in America, people tend to say flutist. And I just tend to avoid all confusion by saying flute player if I don't know who I'm talking to. But most people say flutist in America. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was wondering if that nameplate's been wrong for a long time or something like that.
Oh no, it's correct given the fact that we are in America.
Gotcha. Well, I'm Irving. I'm a media entrepreneur / filmmaker. I own a production company called Ariella. Oh, I don't have my hat on today. I was going to do a merch plug, but I'll save you the pain of having me plug my company. And yeah, we're Mixed Media. This is the awesome thing we do every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where we discuss anything art related. We come from our own particular spaces of art, / art entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. We like to talk about art in general and invite you into that conversation. That's why we like doing it as a live podcast. And I'm really excited today because we have something new, which is interviewing someone, which is the first time we're doing this on the podcast, and I'm super stoked. It looks like we got a few people popping in as well, so hello everyone. And I guess I'll start my segment. So what we do on reviewing Reddit is we find stuff that we see on the internet. It doesn't really have to be Reddit, but that's a nice place to go to find communities of people who are sharing their stuff. So, I'm snooping on, r/short films, watching a bunch of stuff, and I like to pick out stuff that I find interesting. And, hello. Yeah, submit through Discord. There you go. I like to pick out stuff that, interests me. I think that we all can learn from, in terms of the good, and, maybe some things we can learn from in terms of the bad stuff. This time we have mostly good stuff to say. Cool. This film, had me hooked from front to back, and I was really enjoying it. And I said, I normally try to avoid things as long as 30 minutes. So it's a 30-minute long short. So obviously I'm not going to be playing the whole thing here, but, I had to do it because I thought it was that interesting. I wanted to break it down.
Well, thanks very much, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Question: What exactly defines a short then in terms of its length? Because that doesn't sound like it sounds like a longer end of a short. So what's the line between a short and something that's not a short?
I think the Academy definition is less than 40 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. There's this weird dead zone between 40 and an hour or something. I'm not sure. Which you should probably not make a film that length anyway. Am I wrong? I don't know.
No, I think that's right. Please stop me if I'm jumping ahead, but I think the 30-minute runtime, in a way, sort of hamstrung us with festivals. Got a lot of short film festivals put together viewings in blocks, so it's it'll be blocks of 7, 8, 9, 10-minute films maybe. So a 30-minute film is sort of in it's almost like a dwarf feature more than anything else. It's not. It doesn't really showcase what the goal of a lot of short films is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, no, basically what he's saying with the blocks is sometimes they'll set aside, depends on the film festival, sometimes they'll set aside 30 minutes, or sometimes they'll set aside an hour, and they want to film that 30-minute or hour block, let's say with horror films, or let's say with, best music nominations or something like that. And so if you have a long film, they have to sacrifice showing let's say 2 or 3 shorter films to show your longer film. So it's almost as if you have to be twice as good, right? Is a way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, before you continue to be a stranger to everyone who's on the stream, tell us about yourself, your relationship to the film. The film is Bum Promises. There's a link in the description, actually, so if you want to check that out, it's long, so by the time I get to breaking it down, you will probably won't be able to finish it, but the link is in the description. But yeah, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Jason. I was a writer and producer. I was the writer and one of the producers on the movie. I adapted it from a one-act play that I had produced at the University of Southern California in 2015 with Mark Rosenzweig, who directed that production and then also directed the film.
Yeah, that's really cool. That was going to be my next question. I saw that it was adapted from a play, and I was wondering, how that came about. So, what made you decide to go from play to screenplay?
So I was in the theater department at USC, but I was friends with a lot of film people, and I'd say I wrote the script as a stage play because I was able to sort of like execute like the low level, no budget version of that on stage, and I certainly wouldn't have been as a short film, but I think the influences on the script are more filmic than they are theatrical. So when we were coming to the end of our senior year of college, Mark and myself and a couple other guys began to view that as a sort of like an ad hoc thesis project for graduating, was to film this thing and make it a short film through our friend Mike's, and also Mark is also a part owner, and then later I myself became one of the Zephyr Entertainment Network, which is Mike Smith's production company based in LA. So that was sort of a venture into I guess narrative filmmaking for that company and for all of us on a non-academic level.
Ah, it's pretty cool, yeah. So when did you graduate? So was that be like 2015, 2016 or something like that?
Yeah, so we graduated in May of 2016, and I actually skipped the graduation ceremony to fly to North Carolina ahead of everybody else and start scouting locations and stuff for the movie.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I guess a lot of people, especially from a lot of the filmmakers that we talked to last time, they're younger. I don't even think they're thinking. They might not be thinking about college yet. I'm not sure. But some of the people we had on last time, the younger end, and they might be thinking about going to film school. I didn't go to film school, but what are your thoughts about film school in general? I know that's like a hot topic in general.
So I didn't. I graduated with a BA in theater, which I don't know. I would say it's of limited value. I guess part of it depends on the types of financial resources you have. It's like loans or financial aid that you might get that would allow you to go to film school and experiment with those sort of filmmaking technologies and methods there, and also to interact with the sort of people who are going to be going in that professional field. There may not be other ways to, because the sort of populist thing to say is, oh, if you want to make movies, just go and make movies. But I don't know if you're getting access to things like the types of cameras and sound equipment that they get to use, and the same types of people. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm an authority on it. Mark actually also graduated from the theater school with me. I think Mike, our producer, would be probably able to give a more thorough answer on what he thinks is the utility, I guess, of going to film school. But if you want, I could get I know you've been mostly in touch with Mark. I could also reach out to Mike and sort of see what he has to say on the subject and pass that along to you after we have off the call.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll put that in the top comment or something like that. I'll put what the response is about film school. Yeah. So what was the process then? Is it multi-stage process? So I guess how did the story develop? Well, I started in like VFX, then I went into directing because I was like, okay, I think I really want to tell stories. I think that's where I belong. And then I, really started diving into writing. So it's really cool to have you on because that's what I've been talking about the most lately. What was your process in brainstorming to, putting the words down? How'd that go? So
very first started writing the idea when I was probably around 19, and then we filmed it when I was 22. Before that, obviously it's not that long of a time, but would always write things that could never like hook into anything. But the main character in this movie of Bones, and I think he had a couple other names before he was ultimately named that, was the first sort of character whose voice I could hook into, and it was sort of an amalgam of I'm a big fan of folk music, so there's sort of tied into a lot of personas from Americana music. There are a lot of figures sort of on the fringes of society, or like habitual criminals or gamblers and stuff like that, with a certain dialect that I was affecting for the voice of that character, and also sort of I was I was watching the first season of True Detective a lot, and that was there's sort of the metaphysical rambling that I think ends up being tied into the Bones character. So started writing it just as monologues at first, and then sort of figuring out ways that a character like that could interact with a character who was more like myself. What were the circumstances that would make someone like me vulnerable to a character like Bones? Sort of teasing out the plot that way. Wrote a draft of it that I would have been reading that in the winter of, or maybe either the winter 2013 or 2014, and then rewrote it a lot over the course of the next year, and then that's when we did the stage production, and then that would have been the spring of 2015, and then basically from January of 2016 through production was just writing and rewriting the film version of the script. So the basic shape of the story, like what happens in the movie, is basically what happens in the play. I think there are probably some small changes, but not really. The shape of that story that unfolded in the play took place between 2013 and early 2015.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And was it a painful process? Some people describe teasing out a story from their brain as like a kind of like excruciating process of sort of shedding from yourself a lot of personal stuff. So
yeah, there was definitely some of that, and also just I was particularly early on, I was working excruciatingly. I was neglecting schoolwork and working like very long hours on the script, and then the script just wasn't very good. So that definitely stung a lot, because it's like you go into these things with these preconceptions that you're a talented person or whatever, and it's just like hours and hours and hours of input, and then the output was just bad. And like I had a reading of it with some of the other people from my theater department when it was still a play, and I just remember feeling pretty embarrassed by a lot of the stuff that was in it. So yeah, it was painful in that sense, particularly since it was the first major thing that I had worked on. It was a sort of more all-consuming process compared to some of the stuff that I've worked on since then, which has been like much more sort of workmanlike and sort of sectioned off. And I know why I'm working on it, and I know how to work on it productively and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of that just had to do with being a kid, for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What have you been doing since this film? Because it's a long journey. I don't think a lot of people realize, even for short films, they can take really long journeys, to being produced. So yeah, how have you changed, and what have you been up to while that's been going on?
So I'm actually so after writing the movie, I came to New York, and I've been here pretty much for the duration of that time. Since I moved here in August of 2016, I spent basically what would have been the school year from 2017 to 18 working in children's theater in upstate New York in Auburn. And then since then, I've pretty much just been living and working in New York and doing a lot of stand-up comedy. Cool. I've written a couple other scripts in collaboration with those guys from Zephyr, and we produced another short film a couple years ago, a comedic short film me and my girlfriend wrote called Backpack. That's also on the Zephyr website. But other than that, my main thing, doing a lot of stand-up comedy, and still writing various things, scripts and other stuff. Mark and Mike have stayed much more directly involved in film production out in Los Angeles.
Cool. Are you originally from New York, or?
No, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, actually. Went to school at USC, and then I've been living in New York since then. Cool.
Gotcha. Yeah, and how has the film festival run gone? And, well, actually, first, how did you roll it out? Like, did you have a plan beforehand, plan of attack to the film festival circuit, or did you just, kind of go for it? Yeah, how was that?
I think we submitted to a lot of the most prestigious ones first. I wish I could give you more detail on this, because just because Mike was in Los Angeles, and Mark and Mike were in Los Angeles, and were much more directly in control of the post-production process. I believe, and I will reach out to them to make sure there's any corrections on this, but you sort of submit to the most prestigious ones first, because entry into, if you apply to them all at the same time, and then you get into the Anchorage, whatever film festival. I don't even know if there's a real one, but if you get into a less prominent film festival and then also get into Slam Dance or something, then it actually compromises their desire to premiere at Slam Dance if you get into Anchorage. But we didn't get into, I don't think we got into any of the most prestigious ones, and then we did another round of submissions, and I honestly, I sincerely can't remember which festivals it got into. So we went through multiple rounds of film festivals. It definitely it premiered at a few. I think we got a few awards and things like that. And then ultimately, I believe when you would have found it is after we released it on YouTube, where it's I've logged on and been shocked by how many people have seen it, but it's had some sort of life in a internet short film community. So that's been pretty cool, because you do stuff like this, and whatever your ambitions are, there's a lot of things short of that that can happen. But we're very much, I think we're all very proud of the product that we made, and then the fact that it has had just an amount of viewership is, when I think about it, it's definitely it's a pretty wonderful thing for sure.
Yeah, no.
I'm surprised and happy that you found it. I think Mark remains very active on Reddit and circulating it and stuff. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's a smart strategy for sure. And what?
Worked with this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure did.
Yeah, so what was it like seeing it for the first time brought to life on the screen? Were you involved very much in the production process? Were you on set? And then throughout that, when you got to the end and you saw it on screen, what was that like?
I obviously wrote it and was one of the producers on it. My role in the area where we film is that house was my parents' summer house in Cashiers, North Carolina, and we filmed all around that area. We filmed in Cashiers and I think Dillsboro and around Bryson City and maybe Silva a little bit. So before filming started, I flew from California to Atlanta. I was not the one who picked up the equipment, but I got some stuff. So I was in charge of some prop and some design stuff, and I scouted a bunch of locations. And then sort of the core production team, Mike, Mark, Haven, Johnson, who also composed the music, and James Goldberg, who was also a producer, all flew out. And maybe one or two other people, but I think that was the core of the production team. And then so I would go around with Mark, and I had options for some of the locations to film some of the scenes. And he would go, that's a good spot, that's good. Narrowed down where we would be filming. Haven and I believe Mike or someone, they went down to Atlanta because a lot of the rental houses, we were renting film equipment out of Atlanta and then driving it up to North Carolina. So we got a big production truck, one of those big white cube trucks full of poles and shit, and drove it up to North Carolina. So we had that parked at the house. We sort of we coordinated as best we could with the neighborhood about the fact that we would be filming, and a lot of these are people that I'd known since I was a little kid. So for the most part, people in the area were very excited and happy for me that we were doing this. So that part was easy, and then I was basically what would you call it? I was an on-set producer, so I was solving day-to-day problems and collaborate, moving people around and getting equipment to certain places. Producer, PA, we were all kind of doing everything because it's a shoestring project. And then I was also pretty much, for the most part, acting as a script supervisor. I was making sure that the lines were correct on set. There was one thing. So you remember the opening shot is with a train.
Yep.
That was the Great Smoky Mountain Railroad in Bryson City. We drove out a couple days in advance to find the place that would look good for that opening shot. We found that crossing, and Mark and I went to Bryson City when the train was leaving, and we timed out how long it would take to get from the station to the crossing. And then, so that was just us in our car. And then on the day we filmed, we got there a few hours early to set up and everything. When we got ready to shoot it, and I was just like, so this is where Mark was a great director. I was very just not wanting to go through any logistical difficulties to accomplish anything. So at one point there was a question of whether we were going to be able to get a pickup truck for certain things. And he was like, yeah, we need the pickup truck. And with this, there was a question of whether, because we had no permits, we we're not allowed to be doing this, filming around a train set.
Right.
So there was questions about whether this is the smart thing to do. And Mark was like, no, we're just going to figure it out. So I had to go this is like Deep Hick, North Carolina. I went down to like 100, 200, whatever it was, 300 yards before the train tracks, and I just had to stop cars and like lie to them about what we were doing there and ask them to just stop and not cross. And then we got the shot, thankfully, but then this house that was near the train tracks saw what we were doing, and they were just suspicious or were bored or whatever, and they called the sheriff.
Oh, no.
So we all, we got the shot, and then we all had to like jump in trucks and drive away. And one of the guys, Rob, I'm forgetting his last name. I'm sorry, Rob. But he was there as assistant camera and just part of the production team. He drove away with the sheriff tailing him, but just to make sure I got out of town. But in the back of his car, he just had like nothing happened. He didn't get pulled over, but we had like a bag of prop methamphetamine that was just like if he had gotten pulled over, there just would have been a bag of something that looked specifically like it's supposed to be meth in his car. So that was like that was very much the most sort of independent film moment. It's just like illegally getting that shot and getting chased out of town by the sheriff. That was a very movie moment for sure. But just a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like as dramatic as the film happening on set.
It's sort of very backwoods stuff.
Before I ask you to sort of summarize the story, really kind of left field question, but we like to do these things on the show where we give our hot takes on things. So do you have what is your hottest take on anything in the film industry, media related, whatever?
Oh, in the film industry?
Well, you're welcome to say whatever you want, but
I don't know. I feel like audiences are somehow getting more pretentious, but also stupider, if that makes sense. Because it's like when you go back into, and I don't mean to be nostalgic. There's a lot of movies that have come out in the past few years that I love, like a lot, but they're very small and they're directed at small, like vanishingly small audiences. And I was watching Midnight Cowboy the other night, which is an incredibly dark movie about a guy who like comes to New York to like to be a male prostitute, and he's basically living like a borderline homeless life in New York in the late 60s, and it's just an absolute bummer of a movie, like horribly depressing. But then it was a huge hit at the time and a phenomenon. And I think part of that had to do with whatever people's like in the entire country were like trying to figure out what the fuck was going on in New York at the time. But the fact that a movie like that, just like utterly dark subject matter, like utterly adult themes, and of extremely bleak ending, was a huge box office success, is so strange to think about when you consider they're like now it's like big successful movies are basically for children, and then adults like also go and see them. I just think that's so strange. And sort of movies that are about adults and adult things all get made for like $2 million and are shot around like 3 locations with 7 actors total in the movie. And 90 people see them, and then 4 journalists are like, "Oh, it's the best thing ever," and then no one ever talks about them again. It's just very strange how small the cultural impact of film has gotten, particularly because you go back. I don't know. It's just there's so many great movies, and for all people talk about the shrinking attention span, a movie is 2 hours long and then it's over, as opposed to these shows that go on for 7 years and you have to keep like, I don't know. It's just such a different form of consumption.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I think we can agree on that one.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what you said is pretty much what we've been talking about for the past like however many months.
It's very strange. I just got Criterion, and it's like, which is so fun, and being able to watch not just old movies but also just like cool movies from around the world. And it's just I don't know, it's such a populous medium. And one of the great things about living in New York is you have all these art houses that show movies that if you were just bring them in casual conversation, people would be like, oh, that's for artsy nerds or whatever, which to a certain extent it is. But when you watch them with a big group of people, you're like, oh, these are all for everybody. And like more so than like a lot of the movies for adults are made today are for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's I don't think it's a matter of like things being like inaccessible in terms of the audience being able to ingest things properly. I mean, we're exposed to so many different kinds of stuff, different mediums, from really short form to like you said, like these endless shows, all kinds of genres. It's never been more diverse, but at the same time, it's never been more narrow in terms of what the mainstream consumes, which is extremely bizarre. So it's like audiences can ingest pretty much anything. It's just people don't know what's out there. And I'll watch some things with either my wife or some friends, and they'll like be skeptical and they'll be riveted the entire time because it's just a good film. It's not just an artsy film. It's a good film.
Yeah, it's true. But it's hard to get people to I don't know. Oh, dude, I thought it was so funny. I was talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday. Did you see the maybe I'm contradicting myself with this, but did you see the In the Heights movie?
No, I have not. No.
It's it's fine, but it's just it was so interesting when you think about how many stages of production that went through that no one went, "Hey, do you think maybe it's going to be tough to make money on an $80 million musical based on like a thing that sorry, my cat's about to I can't believe they thought they were going to make money on that. Hold on. Yeah, I don't know. So the actual film business, I think, is I'm not in it. I'm not like successful in it, so I don't necessarily feel qualified to speak on it in any detailed terms. But just as a consumer of movies, it's so strange what gets made and how it gets distributed, and what makes something successful.
100%, and I can agree with you on that. Same vantage point. Yeah, so, do you want to give a little summary if your cat's not eating you?
No, she's fine. She's just going to sit on the laptop. So the movie is about a drifter who calls himself Bones. He's sort of loose in the wilderness of the North Carolina mountains, and he's seemingly on the run from something. He meets this guy, Stubbs, who just camps in the woods, is living out in the woods, and from Stubbs he hears that this locally famous folk singer, Arlo Green, I think is the name, it's been a while, has died, that his estranged children are back in town to attend to the funeral. Bones hears the story, and then with a seemingly factually questionable tale about Bones's dad playing with Arlo sometime in the past, sort of ingratiates himself with Arlo's children, Delia and Curtis, in order, presumably, to get some money from them in order to get away from whatever forces he thinks are pursuing them, and then hijinks ensue.
Yeah, it's a good layered story in the sense that there's different angles you're coming at things at different times. So, in short, I really enjoyed the writing because I thought it was not stuck in sort of like that 3-act formula. I don't know how you decided to structure it, or if you thought about structuring it at all, or you just let the story naturally come, or...
I think, there's a thing that I wrote right after, or I guess there's a thing right after I wrote the play that was sort of broken much more successfully into the 3-act structure. As far as that goes, that process was much more nebulous for me. I was really just trying to, it was more just sequence of events than it was like that at the time. Which is actually, that's one of the things when I go back and look at it. I'm glad you like it, and I appreciate the compliments. And I'm certainly very proud of it, and I'm especially proud of the things that were done on the production end and with the acting, and I think it looks very competent and all these things. But one of my problems with it now is that it's I do think the writing is kind of stilted, and it's sort of like just people like stuck in situation. There's like a lot of people like sitting around at dinner talking. I think we had to cut like 15 minutes of that. Anyway, so yeah, that. It was pretty unstructured when I wrote it. I don't think I ever wrote an outline for it. I just, I knew he had to get in the house, and then I knew he had to get out of the house, and I had the sort of idea for the ending from pretty early on.
Yeah, you're sort of kind of getting to an image in your mind or something like
that. Yeah, sort of work backwards.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of how I work as well. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to stick around for me to like break this down, or if you want to. I don't know if you have to head out now, or
no. I'd love to stick around. That sounds great.
All right, cool. So since you're here, I just want to start on the writing, and it's cool that you're sticking around because I'll get to ask questions about what you were thinking when you did what. Yeah,
happy to talk about that stuff.
Yeah. So first off, we drop in with no context, which is surprisingly in mainstream is not very common anymore, to just drop into a story. I don't know if you felt that because it was a short, there was no time for exposition or anything like that, but a lot of times you get front loaded with like, a disgusting amount of exposition, sometimes hidden behind like a hook or something like that. Very overly structured kind of stuff. But here we just kind of drop in, really the setting is the thing that's getting exposed, and who we're supposed to care about is getting exposed at the beginning. I don't know if you thought about that at all, but
Yeah, I think the exposition that comes into play is when he's talking to Stubbs and sort of learning a little bit about Curtis and Delia. Then I think pretty much a big part of the idea of the movie is like there's even enough that this isn't totally the case because there's enough to suspect Bones of being like a shifty guy, but how without context and just seeing this guy how he is, would I or would someone like me or would you, the viewer, treat this guy if he came to your doorstep with such an affecting story, even if it was just words about someone that you loved and cared about and wanted to know better. I think that's part of probably a character like this would maybe intuit how a figure like Arlo would play into the lives of his children, and he's sort of able to play to that. And I think when you're watching it, you want the menace to be vague rather than like, if right at the beginning you have all this stuff about who Bones is and where he's coming from, then it's not really suspenseful and you don't really feel like he's wrestling with anything when he's in the house.
Yeah, I actually just recently watched Psycho for the first time, believe it or not. And at the beginning of Psycho, you just kind of drop into this conversation, right, between main character and her lover, right? Mm-hmm. And this kind of reminded me of that in the sense that you're kind of dropped into a situation where the dialogue is natural, it's just flowing, and the exposition is not just like the characters essentially talking at the audience. It's more so you're slowly learning what the mental state of each person is, and you don't know anything. You don't know anything about Bones. You don't know anything about the person he's talking to. You don't know if that person he's talking to is going to stick around for the rest of the film. You don't know anything. And so you typically, I mean, naturally we come into things with sort of, assumptions. So we see a homeless man, we have an assumption. We see him go to a campfire in the woods, looks like a little camping ground. We make an assumption. We've learned that they don't know each other. We make an assumption, right? But the whole time we're kind of challenging those assumptions in interesting ways, which I think provides tension, essentially. So there's this great tension of what are people's motives? What do people care about? Who should I care about? All that kind of stuff is pretty much unanswered, for a good portion of the film. In fact, the film kind of operates without telling you much at all about what's in everyone's mental states, which I think is what provides the tension, essentially. Yeah, so I really like that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So yeah, I just want to say this whole thing, I think I've talked about tension on a previous episode, so this whole thing just was like a really great example of how to do that well. You have like a whole bunch of different layers of things that are happening. It is kind of like Psycho in that sense as well, where there's kind of layers of things happening and you don't know what relates to what or how things will progress or who will eventually. I mean, if you haven't seen Psycho, there's Hitchcock doesn't really care as much about the individual characters as much as he cares about the overall tension. So any character's at service to the overall tension, essentially. Which I'm trying to say that without spoiling anything. Yeah, so like there's that lack of information, that information starvation. There's like that dramatic irony in a lot of places. So there's like this, we know something, the characters don't know, and that we knowing something provides this extra tension where we don't understand the character's behavior necessarily immediately. They understand themselves, but we know something else happened. So here's a good example I'll give. There's this, so they talk about, like you said, the children of the dead pop star, or was it folk singer? I don't know if I'm getting that wrong.
Yeah, just like the kind of guy that would be famous.
Yeah, exactly.
In the South in the 70s.
Then we get this cut from the campfire lit to the campfire unlit, and then we get these two characters arriving at the same campfire. So there's a bit of dramatic irony there where we know that the prior characters have been there. These characters don't know what happened the night before. And there's a sort of like almost like oppression of fate kind of feeling of like, okay, what's the fate? What's the fated thing about them arriving at the same place? Yeah,
right. Exactly. I think that cut might have been Mark. I don't remember if that was in the script or if he just because obviously we're filming those two scenes back to back in the same location. He might have been the one to think about that they're out for like their hike and just happen across that campfire. But yeah, as I watch it now, that definitely has that effect. But I can't remember if that was me or him or somebody else. Wherever
it comes from, I think it's good.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like that's not the only example. There are many times where we know something, like for example, when we see Bones used for the first time, the characters haven't seen that, and that provides attention for when we hear the noise later, and we're like, okay, what has transpired between seeing him use, him seeing a gun, and then what is going to happen to the characters when they realize that? There's a whole bunch of examples of that sort of dramatic irony. And I'll talk about how the camera work actually helps with that later. Then we have a structure that I thought was pretty nice. It was like, so in terms of peaks, we have like, the first peak sort of happens where we sort of let him in to the house, Bones into the household of the two children of the pop star or singer or whatever. The second sort of peak happens where we have the main character Bones see the gun, and he has that phone call, and there's that noise. That whole thing is sort of like the end of that piece. Then we have the truck arrive, and then we have the last piece is kind of a quick, sort of like release. Not really release, I shouldn't say that. It's the last bit of tension holding out for the rest of the runtime. So I liked that. That was there was nothing in there that was like, okay, this section doesn't need to exist, or this is just happening for the sake of something else. That was a nice progression.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, I think that's what I had to say about tension. That's what really struck me in terms of what was really well done in the writing was presence of tension. In terms of stuff that maybe kind of pulled me out a little bit, I think there was, and it's hard to tell sometimes what's a writing thing, what's an editing thing, what's like what was chosen to shoot on set and whatever. So I have no idea. But I think there's a little bit too much, like the flashing back was a little bit too much.
Oh yeah, you're talking to which specific flashbacks?
Yeah, I'm talking about the to his lover, whoever that is, that he flashes back to. There was a little bit too many times where it kind of took away from the mystique of what was going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was all definitely written in. I mean, there was even more. I think so there were. I think one of them was cut entirely. Correct me if this is wrong. In the first cut of the movie, which was like very much just like based on the script, I think it was like an extra 10 or even 15 minutes long, and it had like I think more of that. And then also more of flashbacks to his sort of immediate past, like right before the movie. So it takes you back to like before he gets to the train and some of the stuff, burning down the meth lab and stuff like that. I think if I were starting this process over, I would have a better sense of like stuff that is overwritten in the script writing stage, because you film these things and it costs time and it costs money. And then you go back and paring it down to like what makes sense. But what isn't too much is more difficult than if you just do the best you can to figure that stuff out on the page in front of you. I mean, I took the script from something like 50 pages to 25 pages.
Wow. Yeah.
Before we ultimately the film, but then it was still, it's particularly when so much of it is like things that I've forgotten since I was writing it, but like, oh, I'm like proud of this thematic connection and the way that this plays into this like influence that I like. It's hard not to be indulgent with stuff like that, and I think you definitely have to go back through and make sure you're not being too, indulgent of whatever narrative devices that you enjoy.
Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm nitpicking, by the way. It's not. None of these are major issues.
I'm not sensitive about stuff.
Yeah. And so yeah, it was really just more like it's like I would rather. It almost felt as though the more times we got it, the less mysterious it was, essentially, because it's like, okay, the first time we see that, it's like, okay, we hear the voice, we see the flashback, we're like, what is that? And I kind of liked that. What is that in terms of, is that a mental thing? Is that like, like what kind of mental thing is it even? Is it because of the drug use? Is it because of, prior psychological problems? Is it because of trauma? What is this? And I kind of liked not seeing as much of it better that way. I would think. And then I think I don't know, this might have to do with how much was cut out, but I think the brother and sisters, what they're there for kind of gets lost. So like the sister, like she has this, like I said, one of the little climaxes is like, where she lets him in. And I don't know, I felt that was well motivated. I didn't understand her change of mind in that moment, other than, okay, maybe she's just sympathetic. But the way we set up their characters in the woods was very like, oh, like these are interesting, complex people. But I felt like none of that got explored very much, you know, in terms of how things played out. But that might have to do with a runtime thing.
It may be partly a runtime thing. There were certainly more details about Delia's background and Curtis's background in certain versions of the script. But I think the fundamental problem is that the character I was interested with and the character I was relating to when I was writing it was Bones, and then so that was these other two sort of function as foils to like allow whatever psychological conflict is happening in Bones to play out, but I didn't have the tools at the time, you know, nor necessarily do I have them now to like have like three real people coming from real places to interact. It was sort of a you know, one sort of fully realized character on the page. You know, I think Greg and Maura, who played Curtis and Delia respectively, did a fantastic job, and I think Mark did a great job directing them. All that stuff. So this is purely about how I wrote the characters. Is that this sort of one fully realized character who I, you know, was working through certain conceptions of self with, whatever, was sort of dynamic and unfolding, and then whatever Delia and Curtis's deal was much more abstract, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah, I kind of felt that. I kind of felt like there wasn't as much to hold on to with those characters. So that makes sense that you were sort of focusing on Bones, who definitely was a well fleshed out, you know. I watched it, you know, a few times. So when I went back and watched it again, very clearly, I mean, that's good directing. I can tell now that I know what's going on with him more, not necessarily that you know really everything about the character, of course, by the end of the movie, you know, I could dissect his reactions and actions a lot better because now I knew what had happened, and so there was a lot more diving into the character. It's kind of like what I like with character dramas in general. Is like, you know, you watch it for the first time, you get a frick ton of tension, you know, and trying to understand people, right? And when you watch it again, there's this whole other film that kind of opens up as to, oh, I can understand what was going through the character's mind here a little bit better now that I know what happened. And that's kind of what happened to me with this one, where he's sitting around the campfire. Even his little micro expressions on his face are very congruent with what he should be thinking, which is some good directing.
And Ian Boyd is a very talented actor. He's you can actually see him. He's in Mank. He's in a scene in Mank. So go check that out. Follow him on Instagram. Maura Mantle and Greg McKillop are the two other main actors. I'm sorry, I forgot the gentleman who played Stubbs. But yeah, first of all, yeah, I think Ian does a tremendous job.
Yeah, I don't know if you know. Well, I'm going to talk about cinematography now because I'm kind of a cinematography nerd. But I don't know if you know, but is your cinematographer was your cinematographer or director like influenced by David Fincher at all, or?
Oh, I bet Mark is a big Fincher guy. Mike DeGioia was the DP. I don't know if he was influenced by Fincher in the way they were framing stuff. I would imagine so. It's whoever was coming out of film school in 2016 was probably watching a lot of Zodiac and shit like that.
Yeah. Here, let me see if I can find like there's like some segments in here where like this dinner scene, the way it's shot is very sort of Fincher. Pretty much all the camera moves are very Fincher. Probably hard to find like a good example off the spot, but watch the film. That is the reason to watch the film. But yeah, so you have like, so what makes it that way is basically you have like these very like you have these translational movements that are happening with rotational movements at the same time. So you have like the camera tracking left, right, and you have like this rotation that's happening at the same time. You have like these framed compositions. So like if you think of, sometimes Fincher likes to do these like very framed shots where like there's the frame within the frame. So like you have like, you know, in some of these shots you have like the banister that's framing out the shot, or you have the tree that's like aiding in the composition, closing out the left side of the frame or something like that. You have that as well. So you have that also while you're moving. So use that to create depth as well, which I thought was pretty cool. And there's a lot of digital zooms and translations as well, which like I don't know any director that does it as much as David Fincher. with like these like sort of like in the editor zooming in, which looks very different from a push or even an optical zoom on a camera, right? Like a push gives you that parallax, right? You have like objects coming in and out in the way that you would sort of expect, and zooms sort of compress the background and all that kind of stuff while you're zooming it optically. This is purely digital, which means that the image is essentially like becoming bigger, right? On the screen to sort of zoom it, which gives it this very like otherworldly. Fincher actually talks about this. His idea for that kind of cinematography is that the world is the stage in his movies, and they're not supposed to be real. It's supposed to feel, it's supposed to feel like a movie, and so that's sort of his philosophy behind that. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it works so well with the story. I think the camera work adds probably as much tension as the story itself has in it. And the reason I say that is because the camera is kind of like, it knows where to go before the viewer knows what's happening, right? So there are certain shots where the camera's panning, completely unmotivated. For people who don't know, motivation is basically the reason why the camera might move. That's sort of the theory behind motivation. So in the other end of the spectrum would be like Spielberg. Every camera move is motivated. So every camera move has something that's moving the camera in a certain direction. Sometimes he'll even add stuff in post. It's kind of odd where he'll add like a rat running across the screen so that he can motivate the camera movement left or right or something like that because he didn't like it. And this is all unmotivated moves practically. So very detached from your, like, it feels like you're roving around in the world as like this sort of disembodied thing rather than being asked to absorb yourself in the world. It's a very different experience. And it works. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry. I was just going to say, so a lot of this I can't speak to, especially articulately. A lot of that is just Mark and also Haven, who's our AD and is as big a cinephile as anybody I know, and Mike DeJoya, very talented. I do know that some of the voyeurism, I think particularly in the parts before Bones gets into the house, when some of the stuff between Delia and Curtis inside the house is unfolding, is sort of, first you're suggesting that Bones is watching the house, and then later once Bones is in the house, you're suggesting that his pursuers are watching the house. And I think some of that came from, I'm a big fan of, and a big inspiration for the movie was Night of the Hunter, the Robert Mitchum movie directed by Sidney Lawton. And there's scenes, it's sort of at its core a pretty similar plot. And before Robert Mitchum's character shows up in the movie, he's outside the house, like observing the characters inside and learning the types of things about them that would allow him to infiltrate their lives. So I only say that to speak to the thing about the sort of voyeuristic or floating observational camera movements, because a lot of the rest of what you're talking about, you would have to talk to Mark or Mike DeJoy about that, or Haven. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like the camera work added to the tension, which I thought was really stellar stuff. What I really dislike is when camera work is essentially just expositional, right? Like it's just there to expose the action. That's pretty much it. There's not really a movie at all that I think you have to do it that way. It's pretty much just a lacking of personality. And this one did not have that problem at all. So who's a big director who you think does that other thing, just the expositional camera work?
Oh, you know what? Nolan does that a lot. It actually bugs me sometimes.
Because he's just kind of like showcase. He's just trying to showcase like how cool the practical effects he set up are. So he just sort of has like big sweeping camera movements and stuff like that.
Yeah, sometimes it just lacks cinematic, character. It's just. Obviously, I actually like Nolan. So that's not a knock on him or anything like that. It's just very, the shots are there because this is what gives us the most efficient way to communicate to the audience something, right?
I was just hearing De Palma talk about that actually on a podcast. It was like excerpts from that documentary about him, but he was talking about, I just watched Blowout for the first time, and he was talking about how it's like he hates the idea of coverage and the idea that you always have to get things from like certain angles that you like figure out later. He's like, you want to know like what you're looking at and why and stuff like that. Yeah, cool. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And then in terms of the color grade, very flat, almost kind of loggy out of the camera sort of thing. There were some scenes where it was there was like a monochromatic color scheme chosen, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, like this is pretty monochromatic. Yeah, out here is pretty monochromatic, which I thought was cool. I think sometimes though, especially outdoors in the woods, this look kind of looks a little muddy and a little without personality as well. So, you know, it's like not because of the lack of separation, because that doesn't bug me, because the muddiness can be part of the look, you know. It's more like there wasn't as clear of a direction with why it looks like that, you know.
I would imagine that at least part of that would be, and by the way, just to everyone watching, to you guys, everything I'm saying is limited by my sort of, I didn't pick the shots. I didn't even really like storyboard and stuff like that. I was on to help facilitate what they had in mind, but I don't necessarily have an eye for stuff like this. I think some of this stuff, we were kind of limited by natural daylight to a certain extent, and there were only a couple scenes that we really were able to like line up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then in terms of the editing, I thought the editing was very competent. There's a lot of restraint sometimes. Like this dinner scene here, there's a lot of restraint from the editor, which I really enjoyed. The editor refrained from like just taking this very planned long take and just letting it run. And instead the editor decided to, actually like really think about which shots to pick out when ending the long shot for short bits of time is really important to punctuate things or to show off certain things. I really enjoyed that. So you had like this really nice play, not just with the camera moving in and out or recomposing the scene or anything like that. You also had the editor choosing to cut to a medium close-up or something like that, which I think it's also your director too, you know, because sometimes you spend so much time planning something, and clearly this you know, shots like that, I look at them like that's a lot of planning, I assume, at least. A lot of effort. Yeah, a lot of effort to get those long takes right. And so, you know, when you're in the editor, you as a director, you might be like, all right, we spent so much time on that long take, we're just going to let the long take run, you know, or it might feel disappointing. But everything was in service of the film, which is good, you know. So I think if you had let it run, I think it would have been not as good. So that was a good decision. And there were many things like that, too, where I could tell that this was a continuous take, but there's some editing choices being made in here for the betterment of the story, not just for, just to put down the best stuff you have, you know, that sort of mentality. I think that's like mostly it, pretty much. The only other thing I'll have to say, I notated in my original notes, I ended up reorganizing them, is I think I don't know what you might have been focusing more on what Bones was thinking sort of towards the end and everything like that, but I think for the sister's actions at the end, and I don't know what comes from where, I think that sometimes her reactions, actions don't really jive with what I think of as life-threatening situations sort of things, and then it kind of took me out a little bit. I've actually been unfortunate enough to be held up by gunpoint once in my life. Ben knows the story a little bit. Oh yeah, you both know the story. In Baltimore. It was a good time. And like it didn't really drive well with what I would think of as I was with two other people as well, and so we kind of debriefed afterwards. And there's a great YouTube channel actually called The Behavior Panel. I don't know if you've heard of them. Mm-hmm. They do like body language stuff. One thing they talk about a lot, because there are a lot of times, you know, talking about lying and things like that. These are like, these aren't crackpots. These are like, you know, the one guy's like former CIA. One guy's like, you know, former Army interrogator. Another guy works for like people in the G8. He won't say who, but pretty legit people. You can look up their channel. They talk about fear a lot because a lot of times lying has to do with fear, right? So there's a lot of fear responses, and it's very physiological. And I think there's like not enough involuntariness about the way she behaves or chooses her actions towards the end there. If I'm kneeling down with a gun pointed at me, I think I would be involuntarily both exit checking, looking for where the exits are, looking at the gun more than I look at his face, ingesting not so much what he's saying because I want to understand him, but more because I want to know how to get out of the situation. I want to say the right words, if that makes sense, that will get me out of the situation instead of I want to connect with him, if that makes sense. Sometimes if you set up the character well, you can get there anyway because the character, that's that character's way of behaving. But I think we don't get enough of the characters for me to say that big of a departure from, what I think would be human behavior to just be in like a complete stress response would be completely different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think part of that has to do with for my at that point in the development of the story fascination with the character of Bones. And it's not enough like taking myself out of Delia's head because I'm like in my brain as the writer, I'm like, oh, what a fascinating psychological change this character has undergone over the course. He seemed like he was really trying to be a good guy, and now he's struggling with that. And that I'm almost putting that into Delia, who you're right probably wouldn't be feeling any of those things, and actually her affection or tolerance for Bones is probably pretty limited and based much more on his being a novelty than feeling some deep spiritual connection to this stranger. Yeah, I think as far as like Kill Your Darlings, I really wanted Bones to talk about the sort of interaction he had with a girl from his past and the sort of the relationship, the crumbling of that sort of human presence had, and the sort of the degradation of his humanity or whatever, and wanting to arrive at that destination and having Delia's character behave in such a way that elicited that from Bones rather than having Delia react in a natural way to the situation and getting to whatever psychological revelations I wanted to get to about Bones through the action of the story rather than just through monologuing. But I think also a lot of that has to do with just particularly at that point so much emphasis and so much obsession with dialogue. I think dialogue was everything, and interesting dialogue is how you get to everything. I would definitely want to. I think in general, I'd want that. If I were to rewrite that scene, I would definitely want it to be way less talky. Because presumably, even take like Bones at that point, he thinks people are on their way to kill him right then. So it's like he's not gonna. Oh, when I was younger, there was a girl I liked. That doesn't even. And I like the effect that the scene has, and I really like the last 5 minutes or so of the movie are what I would go back and enjoy rewatching the most probably. But it doesn't necessarily make sense in like a literal way. And I think the way Delia is responding to being held up by the gun is probably within the context of that sort of larger structural whatever.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. I just remembered one last thing. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there's this the truck coming in, there's this other plot line with these people who are coming after Bones, the main character, while he's also trying to swindle these two siblings. And we sort of introduced that truck early on. I think that might have been a little bit better if we got like an insert of inside the car, so because I think the first time I watched it I didn't immediately understand that was a completely separate thing happening. I was kind of like, did I get pushed back somewhere or something like that? I feel like an insert inside the car of like some distinct thing that shows that it's like a different thing going on would have helped a little bit.
What would have been good is like a key or like something hanging off like a rear view mirror or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I know what you mean.
But besides that though, when they get out of the car, it's such a Breaking Bad moment with their
feet.
Their feet coming out. It reminds me exactly of the twins in Breaking Bad, and I don't know if that was an intentional callback. It looked like a literal homage almost.
That was definitely. I don't know if it was a literal homage, but that the Breaking Bad finale came out. What would have been the fall semester of my sophomore year of college, which is when I would have started writing the movie or the play version. We all watched a ton of True Detective. It was definitely the area of this sort of gritty hour-long crime dramas. It was very much, and still is, the visual, it's in the ether of like what people are processing visually. So I think, probably at least consciously or unconsciously, Breaking Bad was definitely influencing that for sure. Because that was my feed as well. It was me and Haven.
Oh, that's really cool. Got your little cameo.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I got. I just recommend you guys check it out. This is the first time doing an interview, so if you like us bringing people on to like literally talk to them as we like go through things, just let us know and we'll keep doing it. If you got to go, you can go now. If you have any plugs or anything, social media, whatever you want to plug, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. I would check out if you guys are interested in the movie and in the projects that I've worked on with some of these guys, and then that some of these guys have also worked on with other people. Check out the website for the Zephyr Entertainment Network. You can find a lot more stuff directed by Mark Rosenzweig, who directed this movie. Sorry, I'm gonna make sure I plug everyone's things. And Mark is also involved in the Trifecta sketches on YouTube. So he acts and directs a lot of sketches through them. I also I have a podcast that I run here in New York with my friend Matt Summerstein called White Boys Heart Movies. We just talked about Old on last week's episode. Yeah, and then my social media, you can find me at Jason David Comedy on Instagram and at Jason D Comedy on Twitter. So Ian Boyd is on Instagram. He's the guy who played Bones. At Maura Mantle has a lot of very popular comedy videos. You can find her on Instagram, and Greg McKillop is the guy who played Curtis. I believe he has stuff on Insta as well. You can follow what they've been up to since the movie came out.
Cool. Yeah. Very generous with your shout-outs, shouting out your whole team. That's awesome.
Sorry if I forgot anybody, and I'm sorry I've taken up a lot of your guys' time. I really appreciate you having me on the pod. This has been a lot of fun. I haven't talked about the movie in detail in quite some time, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and maybe we'll hook up later. I don't know. You're in the Discord now, so you know where to find us.
I'm on the Discord. You have my phone number. Yeah, I'd love to connect at some other point. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Yep.
All right.
I'll see you.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Take care. If you guys want us to do more interviews, like, with composers or game developers.
Any news or industry?
I posted in the Discord, but on the Scarlett Johansson front, it turns out that there's an email exchange between Scarlett Johansson's representation and some people from Disney, basically acknowledging that they told her that they were planning on simultaneously releasing on Disney Plus. They recognized in the emails that would be a breach of contract, essentially, and then they said, we're going to renegotiate our deal with you so that we can do it the way we wanted to do it. But then they just didn't do that. So it seems, before I wasn't so sure how this was going to go, but that's pretty damning unless there's some way to explain all of that in a way that makes sense. Yeah, that's the update from ScarJo and Disney. So is that it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, thank you so much for watching. If you've stuck around the stream for this long, you are the real one. Why not join us on Discord is my next question. Link is in the description. Pop It community. We're going to be chatting all week, amongst each other about stuff that's happening in film, media, gaming, music, literally anything. We'd like to have more people who have a little more diversity in the arts that they occupy. So if you're a painter, whatever, ballet dancer, right? Get in the Discord and speak about your art. We want to hear it and we want to share with each other. Last thing I'll say is, if you like this podcast, if you enjoy the fact that we review other people's stuff and chat with them and whatever, leave us a comment to tell us what you like or don't like, and hit the like or dislike button. If you really don't like it that much, at least hit the dislike button so that I can know, so we can know what we should do, that we should be doing better and striving for more. So with that said, I'll wish you guys a good week.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.